Heard from the minister, the burdens of mitigation and adaptation do not fall fairly. To date, Africa is perhaps the continent most affected by the climate crisis and yet least responsible for its causes. Our next keynote speaker says we must not allow that paradox to stand in the way of action. Africa should leapfrog dirty energy and embrace clean power. And as we heard from Minister Baerbock, under his leadership, Kenya is doing just that, aiming to reach 100% clean energy by 2030. Please join me in welcoming the President of Kenya, Dr. William Ruto.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. I'm delighted to join you this morning in this energy transition dialogue. I am grateful and I congratulate those who have been involved in bringing us together as the conference celebrates its 9th anniversary. Let me also register my appreciation to the government and the people of Germany for the warm welcome and hospitality extended to me and my delegation. The Berlin Energy Transition Dialogue provides a valuable platform to exchange ideas on how to address the two interlinked challenges we face, that is of climate and energy. The conference comes just a week after the IPCC released the synthesis report, which essentially puts the world on notice that we are on the brink of irrevocable damage unless we act swiftly and before it's too late. And the message was loud and clear. The world needs to reach net zero sooner than was anticipated in the Paris Agreement, that is by 2040 instead of 2050. How to achieve that goal and what are the drastic actions needed to cut emissions is the dialogue that governments and policymakers around the world must have. And that is why this energy transition meeting is timely. The dialogue on energy transition, on how to balance energy security, affordability, and lower greenhouse emissions, is at the heart of sustainable development, and it is a transition that needs to happen even faster. The vital role of energy in our lives and economies must, and was brought home last year in 2022, especially to Europe, more compellingly than ever before in recent history. Europe is accelerating its transition to renewable energy, now driven not only by an existential climate imperative, but also by energy security concerns. I think my sister has ably put that in context. Let me today share with you what this transition looks like in Kenya and for Africa, and give the vision of our Africa's assets and our ability to leapfrog technologically, make the continent, and Kenya in particular, a critical partner if we are all together going to navigate this next era of energy transition. As I do that, I hope you won't mind me reminding us that 138 years ago, a very different conference was taking place here in Berlin. One that also involved collaboration and cooperation, but of a more exclusive and violent nature. At that Berlin conference, it was a German chancellor who convened 14 of the world's leading powers to divide Africa among themselves and carve up our land and our people as they saw fit. In the years since that conference, so much has changed. We have seen the rise and fall of empires, the independence of African states, and the dawn of new challenges that demand a collective and collaborative response from all of us as we are gathered here in one such. Today, in Africa, we face multiple intertwined crises. We are the continent least responsible, but most vulnerable to climate change and its impacts. We are the continent with the least energy access, with over 600 million Africans still without access to energy. And of course, Africa still carries the scars of colonialism and economic and institutional dependencies that followed it. We not only have to provide secure energy access in clean and renewable way, we need to do this while managing economic dependencies, addressing odious debts, completely shifting our development models to finally prioritize the true flourishing and well-being of our people. But I have not come here to dwell on the past or to list seemingly unsurmountable challenges. Africa is not simply a victim in this story. Quite the contrary. It is precisely in light of these challenges that Africa's leadership on climate action is not just powerful, but it is also inspiring. In Africa, not too far from here, lies a continent of abundance, especially when it comes to renewable energy and green industrialization potential. The continent's renewable energy potential is 50 times greater than the anticipated global electricity demand for the year 2040. The untapped solar and wind potential is rated as super abundant in most African countries, meaning the potential is over 1,000 times the current demand. By contrast, all of Europe is classified as either replete or stretched, with renewable energy potential less than 10 times the current demand, indicating they will not be able to meet a massive growth in energy demand with domestically generated supply. Moreover, in Africa lies 30 to 40% of the world's minerals, including those on which the green energy transition depends, and plentiful relevant natural resources and assets. Add all that to Africa being home to the world's youngest and most rapidly expanding workforce. 60% of Africans, for the record, are under the age of 25. And you start seeing, from where I stand, why we need a conversation about Africa. Besides, we have the benefit of being able to leapfrog into a cost curve of technologies that didn't exist even a decade ago, one that supports green economic growth. As Frans Timmermans said a few weeks ago, and I quote, "The continent of Africa is probably going to be the most important partner for Europe in terms of developing the renewable energy sector," end of quote. And Kenya is leading the way. We will be the continent's green energy hub. Our national grid is small, at just 3 gigawatts, yet 92% of the power on it comes from zero-carbon sources like geothermal, hydro, wind, and solar. We aspire to reach 100% renewable in 2030 and to take a quantum leap to 100 gigawatts grid size and 100% renewable by 2040. That is possible thanks to our untapped potential of nearly 78 gigawatts of solar energy, over 57 gigawatts of wind energy, at least 10 gigawatts of geothermal energy, and 6 gigawatts of hydro. But the small grid size and relatively high energy costs have made it hard to attract energy-intensive industry to Kenya in the past. Yet energy-intensive anchor demand is exactly what is needed to make investment in additional renewable energy generation capacity bankable. Therefore, renewable energy generation capacity and industrial deployment need to be developed concurrently to overcome the current stalemate where each is waiting for the other to happen. This is a fundamental difference with European renewable energy development, where limitations may be available locations, maybe permits, and grid management, but you do not need to line up demand before you develop an investment case. This African reality tends to surprise foreign investors and drive the misunderstanding that there is no viable opportunity. So, what does Europe need to do to enable Africa meet its full potential as an energy and climate solution center? 1, Africa needs the right type and amount of investment capital to become the green industrial powerhouse of the world. Renewable energy investment and associated infrastructure is almost all upfront capex. With the right level of investment, Africa can provide energy success for all by 2030 while reducing total emissions related to energy generation by approximately 80%. Let me say that again. With the right level of investment, Africa can provide energy access for all by 2030 while reducing total emissions related to energy generation by approximately 80%. Number 2, Africa should position to serve European demand for products and services and not to be locked out through trade barriers. The carbon border adjustment mechanism to be introduced by the EU should engage production from places such as Africa that could offer low embedded emissions produced using renewables. And number 3, to enhance innovative financing, the EU should access more high-quality African carbon credits, which offer core benefits such as biodiversity and improved livelihoods to be used in EU emission trading compliance markets. We need to work together to raise standards and avoid low-integrity carbon while realizing high prices for African countries and communities that are doing the difficult work of protecting nature and managing carbon. In Kenya, Parliament is finalizing the enactment of the carbon market regulations and activation plan, which should be in force in a few months. Aligning European concessional and multilateral capital to Africa's climate action agenda will not only generate economic growth and competitiveness, but also contribute to addressing the climate crisis for humanity. There is need to face down climate-incompatible funding so as to free funds for climate action and lock much more concessional finance and low-risk development finance needed to be much more available, much more accessible, and much more affordable. Number 5, African economies do not have sufficient access to suitable debt for development to make the necessary investments for climate action. The debt to GDP ratio in Africa today stands at 65, up from 57%, the pre-pandemic figure in 2019. The risk profile of countries change between global rating agencies looks at the debt to GDP ratio and interpret the country's debt carrying capacity. Number 6, access to international finance markets at very different rates, the brunt of monetary policy from advanced economies that pumped liquidity into their economies during the pandemic to protect their populations, currency depreciation, and expensive debt servicing, all coupled with climate change impacts, continue to impede growth and investment in clean technologies. Africa can benefit from European, and in particular German experience in workforce development and reskilling. Kenya will require a significant investment in building capacity and skills in its young workforce, and Germany's success in developing a fit-for-purpose vocational training system provides a good model that Kenya can and is adopting, and while learning through other partnerships. In fact, the government of Kenya has succeeded over the past 8 years to increase the number of students in our TVETs from about 90,000 to the current 500,000 students. In Kenya, we are on track in driving a carbon-negative industrialization agenda. Investments into our country will be industry built on 100% renewable energy. Germany, a prolific exporter of industrial manufacturing capacity, including into Kenya, should establish Kenya as a key industrial hub for German manufacturers as they transition to a new era. A combination of German technology and Kenyan geothermal and renewable resources is the best collaboration for green industrialization. New sales of electric cars, vans, and especially two-wheelers has been steadily on the increase, and so Germany could make an ideal partner in this very important and transformative journey towards global e-vehicle manufacturing hub. We will also be a critical partner to Europe in the supply of green hydrogen. Hydrogen produced using renewable energy can be exported to any part of the world, including Europe. Germany's green hydrogen strategies anticipate that the country will have to import 85% of its green hydrogen requirements by 2030. As Europe's green hydrogen demands support the development of reliable supply chains and rules-based international hydrogen markets, Kenya is a good investment partner to help decarbonize the German economy and green the EU manufacturing capacities. You can see from my discussion that we are moving fast in Kenya. We have the road ahead mapped out for green growth, and we are well on track to be the green energy hub. We offer, especially to Europe, the potential for a strategic green energy partnership. That partnership requires private and public investment to build together on the assets we have. We can accelerate the energy transition radically, reducing greenhouse gas emissions, while at the same time protecting our economic growth. But it requires bold strategic partnerships. Winning will not be possible without allies and partners who will bring technologies and investments necessary to unlock the huge renewable energy resources in Kenya and the continent of Africa for a mutually beneficial win-win outcome. Of course, we must acknowledge that the EU has been an ally and partner to Africa on these issues for many years now. In 2007, we saw the launch of the Africa-EU Energy Partnership with the aim to facilitate the achievement of universal access to affordable, sustainable, and modern energy services in Africa. We have also seen partnerships deepened beyond the continent level to bilateral levels. Most recently, these have come in the form of just energy transition partnerships, which I know we will be hearing much more about over the next coming days. And of course, Europe remains one of the biggest investors and trading partners in Africa's economies more broadly. It goes without saying that Africa-Europe relations have helped create millions of jobs and remain a critical cornerstone of our future. In conclusion, the challenge I put forward to us for the next days is as follows. If we want to have a real chance of addressing the climate crisis, if we want to have a real chance of addressing past and persistent inequalities, and if we want to have a real chance of breaking the cycle of dependence that have plagued Africa and the global South more broadly for decades, then we will need to rise to the challenge of genuine partnership. Partnerships for renewable energy developments across the continent that are people-centered, socially and environmentally sound. Partnerships that do not simply worsen the existing cycles of indebtedness and dependence. Partnership that puts real, additional financing into African-led just transitions without simply increasing debt and profit extraction. Partnerships that do not push Africa further into the past and further into fossil fuel lock-in, while failing to invest in real transition pathways towards a better, brighter, and cleaner future. I hope you all will join me in the next few days in rising to this challenge of genuine partnership. Finally, I would like to announce to you that Kenya is hosting the first ever Africa Climate Action Summit in Nairobi from 4th to 6th September this year. The object of the summit is to rally the world to tackle climate challenges that the least emitting continent, and to more importantly tap the numerous opportunities that Africa presents towards global zero ambition. The summit will provide a unique platform to deliberate on the nexus between climate change and Africa's development reality, and the need to push for increased investment in climate action globally, and specifically in Africa. I invite German and European companies and organizations to come and sample opportunities and ideas on Africa's contribution to solving this global climate challenge that poses existential threat to humanity. Let us work together for pro-climate, pro-growth development. It has been proven that we can reduce emissions even as GDP grows. And Kenya and Africa are the best partners for this paradigm shift. I thank you.
Thank you very much, President Ruto. You have given us powerful inputs for our dialogue over the next 2 days, including for a session specifically on cooperation between Africa and Europe that we will host this afternoon. Ladies and gentlemen, when it comes to climate justice, few international leaders are more committed than our next keynote speaker. She's a tireless advocate for broadening access to sustainable clean energy and accelerating the industrial transformation. And she was recently awarded the coveted Energy Institute Prize for her efforts to mentor and empower young people to get involved. She's an esteemed return guest here at BETD. It is a great honor to welcome back to this stage the CEO and Special Representative of the UN Secretary General for Sustainable Energy for All and co-chair of UN Energy, Damilola Ogunbiyi.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for having me speaking to you here again. I would like to have a special thanks to the Federal Foreign Office and the Ministry of Economic Affairs and Climate Action for convening this 9th Berlin Energy Transition Dialogue and for inviting me to address all of you. I cannot put it better, as our African champion did, President Ruto, for the clean energy transition, that there is no transition without Africa. And this notion that the global north can develop to a path of net zero and leave 1 billion people in energy poverty is just not acceptable. I'd also like to thank my Minister of Power in Nigeria, Minister Abubakar Aliyu, for his continued drive to show that clean energy isn't a nice to have, but it's a way of life for Africa's largest economy. Today, it is more important than ever to drive forward the global energy transition in the interest of climate change mitigation, energy security, economic diversification, and also development. We are currently at a time of great uncertainty that has led to 3-dimensional crises all happening at the same time. That is food, energy, and finance, greatly affecting some of the world's most vulnerable people, countries, and economies, pushing millions back into poverty, especially energy poverty. And energy poverty is something we don't speak about enough. Today, on my continent in Africa, the average African that has energy has about 404 kilowatt hours compared to the average American that has about 13,000 kilowatt hours. So already it is unjust. Already being born Black African like myself, you're 20 times at a disadvantage as anybody else on earth because you cannot develop without energy. It is, however, an opportunity to change how the world perceives energy transition and energy security. We are already witnessing the global energy landscape changing dramatically. For example, renewable energy capacity in the EU is projected to double between 2022 and 2027. This is great. Similarly, a commitment towards energy transition, spoken very well by President Ruto, is happening in developing countries, both in Asia and Africa, with much less resources. However, it is important to stress that the energy crisis is truly global. It does affect Europe and the global north, but it also affects emerging and developing countries. The energy transition in developing countries includes to transition out of poverty, like I said, transitioning towards development, transitioning towards growth, transitioning sustainably, as we have found, because most of us in developing countries are already using low carbon. Global investments in renewable energy reached a record high in 2022. There was about $0.5 trillion spent, but that only represented 40% less of the average investment that we need every year. But what was most striking with this development was that In absolute terms, sub-Saharan Africa only received 1.5% of that global investment. When you talk about countries being priority, when you talk about the development case, I really want to put that in context. So 15% of the world's population only received 1.5% of the renewable energy investment, and this really has to change. The disparity in renewable energy financing received by the developed versus the developing countries has increased significantly over the past 6 years. It is for this reason that we need to be creative and develop new approaches to ensure that we leave no one behind when it comes to energy transition. This is why we have to be specific in context. We have to help countries develop country-specific solutions because no one transition will be the same dependent on country. So you just can't take something from the global north and put it in the global south and just assume it's going to work. We have to respond to the global needs and the global phenomenon when it comes to national programs. And I'm really happy that President Ruto spoken about the carbon market. We're working very hard with his team as well to really push forward the African Carbon Market Initiative, which was launched at COP27 with President Ruto and 8 other presidents. It's really important that we see climate finance emerge as an important source of capital to really drive climate ambition. The African Carbon Market Initiative has very, very aggressive targets. One is to produce 300 million carbon credits annually by 2030 and 1.5 billion credits annually by 2050, to unlock 6 billion in revenue by 2030 and over 120 billion by 2050 for Africa to support the transition. It supports 30 million jobs on the continent by 2030, and it can support 110 million jobs by 2050. It is very, very key and important that we drive this initiative, and I'm very happy that Kenya will be the first country with the Kenyan Activation Plan, hopefully to be launched in September. Ladies and gentlemen, it is critical when we develop solutions that we look at the continent as also a green continent, a continent for green industry. We have also launched what we call the Renewable Energy Manufacturing Initiative for Africa and also for Asia, looking at the manufacturing of PV solar, lithium batteries, and two-wheelers as well. It's critical to understand that the continent should not be seen as an extractive continent, but a continent that can really add value. In working towards the energy transition, we need to recognize the differing energy realities in different parts of the world and ensuring that the energy transition pathways allows us to have differentiated approaches to our common goals. All governments, and I really repeat this, all governments need to prepare energy transition plans that take into consideration their reality to green growth. This is a critical policy tool and investment tool. It delivers affordable, reliable, and clean energy for people who don't have energy. And when I talk about reliable energy, I also mean electrification and clean cooking. Many developing countries have already demonstrated the willingness to do that with their leadership. I spoke about my country, Nigeria. We have Kenya, who's developing their green growth plan as being a real master for green industry on the continent. We've got Ghana, and we also have Barbados. And I'd like to go a little bit off script by how important these energy transition plans are. The one that was launched by President Buhari at COP26 showcased the whole of economy change that we're asking governments to do. This isn't just the renewables going to the power sector. This is what happens to your transport sector, to your work sector, how you build your buildings, what happens to clean cooking. It's a whole of economy point of view. What it also does, it gives you the price tag of how much it will cost. In my country, Nigeria, it will cost $1.9 trillion for Nigeria to reach net zero by 2060, of which 410 billion of this will be above business as usual spending. These numbers are really important, where we all come together in COPs and try and get 100 billion. That is just not going to cut it. And we can't do that without public and private investment. And that is what this is. It's a real investment opportunity. So, having said that, the importance of energy transition plans and countries like Germany supporting, who already have such a strong base with BMZ, GIZ, KfW already investing in Africa, we feel would be a really great thing for the transition. I would like to reiterate that the energy transition to succeed, no one can be left behind. And in closing, we must prioritize diverse thinking and really be truly inclusive when we make these solutions. We cannot have an energy transition that replicates the past inequalities, the inequalities with women, the inequalities with workers, and the inequalities with entire communities. The energy transition must respond to people. It has to be people-centered. You can't have an energy transition without thinking about economic growth and development. I look to all of you leaders in the next few days to give us the solutions we need. We are committed in the UN family and also Sustainable Energy for All to help any of these countries deliver their energy access and their energy transition goals. Thank you so much for listening.
Thank you very much, Madam Ogunbiyi. Ladies and gentlemen, we end this opening ceremony with the words of an outspoken young leader who has been campaigning for climate action in her home country, India, and globally for the past 4 years since she was 7 years of age. She is a World Children Peace Prize laureate and a frequent speaker at gatherings like this one, and sees herself as an advocate for the countless people and animals around the world whose voices are not heard. Please give a very warm welcome to the founder of the child movement, Lisipriya Kangujam.
Dear brothers and sisters of Berlin, Kurumjari Namaste. My name is Lisipriya Kangujam. I'm 11 years old, Indian climate activist, and the founder of the Child Movement. I'm also the special envoy for the President of Timor-Leste. I'm coming here all the way from India by traveling thousands of kilometers to tell the rich country nations to pay for the loss and damage caused by the climate crisis to the global south. Today's global climate crisis is caused by the rich nations, and we are just the victims of it. Children are dying due to war in Ukraine. Children are dying due to earthquake in Turkey and Syria. Children are dying due to air pollution and heat wave crisis in India. Children are dying due to flash floods in Pakistan. Children are dying due to starvation in Ethiopia. And children are out of school to fetch water from a very long distance in Africa. Millions of children like me are losing their lives, losing their parents and homes due to climate disasters. Sacrificing the lives of the millions of innocent children for the failures of our leaders is unacceptable at any cost. And instead of spending billions of dollars on wars, if we spend it on ending poverty, giving education, and fighting climate change, then what a wonderful place our Earth would be. As per various reports, 40% of the insect population has gone. 69% of our forest has gone. And 40% of the Himalayan glaciers has gone. And 70% of the wildlife species has gone. There is no mystery to widespread vanishing species so rapidly. We are the cause. There are too many of us demanding too much from our Mother Earth. But we are the top protector. That's why I started a child movement in India with the children to defend our planet. There is a long history of lies by our leaders. That's why our planet is in irreparable damage today. If there's no nature, then there will be no food, no growth, and no security, and no future. Don't forget why you are here today. You are not here to give some few speeches to get some claps from the audience and to forget what you are talking here. Stop telling beautiful speeches in every events, conference, and platforms. Our future lies in your hands now. The forest belonging to the indigenous tribal people, like Amazon rainforest in Brazil and Hasdeo forest in Chhattisgarh, is sold out by our leaders to big companies for coal mining and other illegal activities. Not just destroying our planet and our future, it snatched away the forest and land rights of these indigenous tribal people. This is unacceptable at any cost. My country, India, is facing lots of environmental issues like floods, droughts, heat waves, cyclones, locusts, forest fire, glaciers burst, etc. at the same time. These are all the impact of climate change. And deforestation must be an international crime. Latest IPCC report says that climate crisis is caused by human activities. But it's really caused by our leaders due to lack of political wills. Small island countries like Maldives are submerging inside the sea. Many rivers and lakes are now dry and dead. Frequent cyclones are devastating our homes. And habitats of countless and voiceless animals are now being used for mining. While fires are killing millions of innocent animals every year. And many forests have been transformed into deserts. This is not the change we want. And if you don't know how to fix it, then please stop breaking it. The Ministers of Forest, Environment, and Climate Change means to protect our forest, environment, and the climate, not to protect the people who you care. You still don't panic about the climate crisis. What you panic is throwing a tomato soup on a sunflower art and arresting, silencing the voice of the climate activist. There is no value of an expensive art, luxurious car, or a beautiful home and money on a dead planet. We must change our behavior to save our planet. Young people, civil societies must hold lawmakers accountable for their political decisions. When our politicians fail, it means the first line of victim will be your children. Climate education must be mandatory in every school education curriculum. There will be no climate justice without climate. There will be no climate solution without climate education. And our governments must work together to manage a just transition away from coal, oil, and gas, which are the top cause of today's global climate crisis. And rich country nations must pay now for the loss and damage to the poor, vulnerable countries. There will be no climate justice without climate finance. I have a dream where there are more bicycles on roads instead of more motor vehicles. I have a dream where all the coal power plants and thermal power plants are replaced by clean renewable energies. I have a dream where all the children living in this world have the access to clean air to breathe, clean water to drink, and clean planet to live. And asking clean air to breathe, clean water to drink, and clean planet to live is all our basic rights. Your action will decide our future tomorrow. My generation is already the victims of global climate crisis. I don't want our future generations to face the same consequences, or even worse, because of your action today. Thank you, Jai Hind, Sanaliba Manipur Nayafre. Thank you once again.
Lisipriya, thank you very, very much for giving us such a powerful push and reminding us how urgent it is what we need to accomplish. Ladies and gentlemen, this does bring our opening ceremony to a close. I'd like to once again thank all of our speakers and thank you for your attention, for joining us for this ceremony. I'd also like to express my gratitude, if I may, to our sponsors. They include the Agency for Business and Economic Development, BAE Batteries, Baivare, Enertrag, Goldbeck Solar, HH2E, Siemens Energy, SMA, and the Smarter E Europe. We're also very grateful to our media partners, Clean Energy Wire, PV Magazine Group, Table Climate, and the Tagesspiegel Background Energie and Klima. And ladies and gentlemen, a very quick word about what's in store. We do now have refreshments outside if you are with us here live in the room. During all of our breaks, we have online studio sessions that you can follow if you're here in the Weltsaal, also with headphones that we have for you at the seats. Coming up right now, a studio session on the role of government in the global energy transition. Over now to my colleague, Malcolm, who will host that discussion.